Hi everyone, I know it's getting late and I'll try not to be too long. I'll try and be precise and get to the point of mine. It's been very interesting listening to what's been happening around other areas of our region. But for Aboriginal people, I just like to say that I was born on an Aboriginal government reserve over 72 years ago, and grew up in that time when I wasn't counted as a citizen, part of the Flora and Fauna Act. So for the first 20 years of my life, I was a non-citizen with no civil rights as a person, as a female, and definitely no civil rights as an Aborigine. I grew up living in extreme poverty, dirt floors with corrugated irons, sheets for walls. Those early days, we were always sick and always in and out of hospital because of the third and fourth world conditions that we lived in. And this is in Australia. This is not in a third world country. This is in a first world country. And this is the conditions that some of my people actually lived in. In my formative years, education for Aboriginal people on government reserves and elsewhere were non-existent. We were not considered intelligent enough to be educated. After all, I was destined to be a maid, a mother's helper, a cook, tenured to work for white families on sheep stations and homes in and around Brisbane and the Gold Coast. Back in the early 1950s, I was one of 4 Aboriginal kids who were the first to attend high school. In those days, our education, we spent about 8 years going to grade 4 because we weren't considered intelligent enough to be educated. We just learned enough to write our names, to sign a piece of paper when we got our allowance. In those days, we didn't receive any monetary assistance or special tutoring. It was our elders who would press a 2-bob coin or a shilling into our hands so that we could buy something for lunch. Many days I went to high school without breakfast or lunch, and due to our isolation on the reserve, my understanding of the broader community, the English language nuances, and the monetary system was beyond my ken. Because we didn't get paid, we couldn't go to the stores and buy things. We were given rations, and that's why I don't know why they put me in a commercial class while I learned bookkeeping, because I had no understanding of money whatsoever. But nevertheless, I passed and I was awarded the Queensland Junior Certificate, and even though I was awarded a high school education, I was still indentured to work on sheep stations. When I absconded from one of my assigned tenures, I headed for Sydney. Being on those stations, we were hundreds of miles from anywhere. I always felt that my life was in peril in terms of my personal welfare, because those stations I worked on, they were sheep stations where you had shearers on those stations. And I was the cook that had to go down to the shearing shed to take the morning teas or lunches down, and I could just feel the eyes on me and the comments being made by these young men or these men on this property. And I had to turn a blind eye and a blind ear to that for my own sanity and my own peace of mind, and work out my own personal safety. How do I keep safe from those things? I was always scared, but nevertheless I decided that I absconded. That means that I left the community or the mission without government approval. So I headed down into Sydney. When I was down in Sydney, I never mixed with the Aboriginal community because that was the first place the Queensland government would have looked for me. If I was caught, I would have been sent to an island like Palm Island or another Aboriginal settlement that was far worse than the one that I grew up on. So I just stayed incognito in the city. And I hardly made any friends with the Koori mob down here, because first thing they would do, they would go and talk to the Aboriginal group in Redford or elsewhere and say, do you know Joan so-and-so? Oh yeah, she just lives around the corner. And of course I would have been packed up and taken back to Brisbane, back to Queensland. So I stayed in Connecticut and raised my kids in the suburbs. When I went back to, education was always the key for me. I was always striving and thirsting for education, because I knew I could do something better than ironing and washing other people's clothes and cleaning other people's homes. But it was really, really hard to find any kind of decent employment down here in Sydney, especially in an office for an Aboriginal person. So I worked in factories. When I got married down here, I raised my family down here. And while my children were young, I continued to work at all kinds of jobs, from cleaning in factories to night shift at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital as a nurse's aide. And every bit of money I earned, I squiggled away to pay for my own college fees. I was also so driven to ensure that my children had access to quality education outcomes, and to my embarrassment, and to the embarrassment of my kids, was constantly up at the school talking to their teachers about their education. So finally, by the time I earned enough to go back to college, I was ended as a mature age woman. I succeeded in gaining a teaching qualification, and this provided me with an opportunity to teach adults, non-Indigenous adults, which in the first instance for many years were, as I said, non-Indigenous people. My husband was very supportive, but he just couldn't understand why I continued to study, even after gaining a postgraduate qualification. My drive in the education sector was to provide opportunities to put systems in place for other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to have a second chance at education. And while I was working in the sector, I joined the New South Wales Teachers Federation, and I was on the National Education. Education has always been important to me, and I ended up going around teaching non-Indigenous teachers how to teach Aboriginal people. So my drive in education was also to have a look at changing curriculum to allow Indigenous people to come back into education, to have a second chance at education. And a lot of my work is still doing that. And as I said, my drive in the education sector was to provide opportunities to put systems in place for other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And we call it that as a second chance education, because many of us never had a first chance at education. I believe that it's through this medium of education that I'm able to more fully to participate in the wider community and for women generally. Nowadays, I believe that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women have many more opportunities available to them and are actively taking advantage of them. I know of and I'm aware of the many different career paths that our women are taking. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are now doctors, nurses, teachers, lawyers, parliamentarians, consultants, business managers, to name but a few. I know that our women of today will continue to build on our inner Indigenous resilience, growing more strong in whatever they choose to be or whatever they choose to do, to make a difference to our people and to others. Thank you.